And we're live. All right, let's wait for the social love to begin. Oh wow, we're going live, and it put a screenshot of me on it. It's not what I was expecting.
Yeah, well,
that's all right. All right. So hello everyone. If you're tuning in live or tuning in afterwards, my name is Kevin Griffin. I'm one of the co-founders of RevolutionConf, and we're back again in June 1st and 2nd, 2017, for the second iteration of RevolutionConf. And today I have with me John Athayde. How are you today, John?
Doing great. How are you, Kev?
Good. So, John, our purpose with these videos is to give our attendees a look inside what our speakers are all about, where they're coming from, and what they should expect when they're in the conference center. They're looking at the schedule and they go, all right, I have 4 choices at this time slot. Who should I go see? And there's only so much information you can get from a title, from an abstract. And we really want to get into your head about what this talk is about and what would I get out of it as an attendee. So we'll cover that. Let's start with you. Give us your background story. Where do you work? Where you live? Tell us about your family, your dirty secrets, anything you want to say.
All the things that I could be blackmailed with?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, good. Well, I actually have my background's in architecture, the building variety. I have my master's in architecture. Went from that. I was already doing web work in the late 90s in college, and kept doing that at the same time as I was doing the architecture stuff, and migrated pretty quickly into doing that full time in the early 2000s. About 2006-ish, I joined up with Amy Hoy, and we did a company called Hyphenated People for a year and change. And it's basically been, my focus has been like high-end product UX. I have a lot of front-end experience as well. I worked with InfoEther, and we got acquired by Living Social. And I'm currently the VP of Design at CargoSense, which is, I'm there with Rich Kilmer and Bruce Williams and a variety of other Ruby and Elixir people. So now I used to live in DC for a long time, and I grew up in Hampton Roads, actually, in Yorktown. So
okay,
not too far away from the and now I live up in Charlottesville on a small farm where I pretend to know what I'm doing and often just make a lot of mistakes with a wife and 3 kids and a bunch of goats and chickens and all sorts of other things.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, you got your hands full up there.
Exactly.
So you already kind of went on to our second question was, let's go even farther back. How did you, so you have a master's in architecture. So that's cool. I'm a huge fan of architecture. My brother-in-law is an architect. I know a little bit of the behind the scenes, just the thought processes of what goes into designing a building. How do you make that jump from architecture into the software realm?
Architecture is that what you learn in school is not necessarily, I mean, you learn about the details of building construction, and literally they're called details, like literally drawing out how this part of the floor joist comes into the wall and what you need to spec. But the bigger part that I learned and was able to apply is talking about the design process. So program, and not software, program, but program in architecture is who is the user, how are they going to use this space, what are the requirements, what are the limitations based on the site, based on the code, and the code in this case being a building code, so international plus city, state, all those kind of other things that affect legally what you can actually construct. And so taking all those constraints and then starting to design a solution to fit the need. Far too often buildings are built and they're kind of built in a generic way. And I think you could probably say this about software too. And people don't take into account how the user gets from point A to point B. So we see this in software a lot, which is, it's a CRUD app. Everything's just CRUD. There's no efficient flow. You can do everything. I'm a user, and in order to achieve this goal, I do these things in this order, and then we optimize our software for that. Same thing we would do with the space. You don't want to sit and put in somebody's house if they're going to bring, you know, their groceries home, you don't want to put the kitchen at the other end of the house from a place where they can pull their car up.
Okay.
Likewise, you don't put the dining room upstairs from the kitchen very often. I mean, in some of the older, you know, antebellum houses, that was the way, but that was because there was a staff or slaves handling things like that. So there was a different kind of social separation. But in modern design, we definitely don't do that, because it's a horrible experience. You don't want to walk across the house carrying a casserole every night.
I remember when we bought the house I'm living in right now, we looked at dozens of houses, and there were a couple of them where they would say, "Oh, this is a 3-bedroom house," but what they don't tell you before you get there is that, like, one bedroom, the only way to get there is through another bedroom, and it's like, well, all right, that doesn't make any sense. How does this flow work for anyone? And I see exactly where you're coming from. Oh, awesome. Yeah, you're talking about the experience of someone coming in. One of the things I read a long time ago is, I'm a huge Walt Disney nut, and I was reading about the problems that they were trying to solve, the experiences they were trying to build with Disney World and or Disneyland and then Disney World, and all of it was about the experience of when you enter the park. Like, how should the main street look with the view of the castle at the end? And the entire main street was architected from that standpoint of what should it look like from some coming in. And I've grown to appreciate that so much. And it's really, I'll let you talk more about it, but I think from my standpoint, it's really hard to translate that into software, because so many of my projects are just get it done, get it done, get it done. And my clients don't have the same appreciation that I do. It's like, well, I want to
of the design, well, still trying to figure it out. I mean, one of the newer things that's evolved maybe in the last 5 years is called service design. And if you ask 10 different people what service design is, you'll get about 12 answers. Yes. So, but I mean, in general, it's talking about how our stuff fits into an overall experience. Like, if from the moment I hear about the company, you know, until you know, quote unquote, the end of that experience, you know, which it could be perpetual at the end, right? You know, how is the marketing? How is the space that you arrive in? How does this fit into your overall day? And there's a couple of researchers like Kelly Goto out of San Francisco that really does a lot of like immersive, follow people around with cameras kind of research, which is crazy stuff. It's really cool to watch. You know, there's in architecture, and this is kind of jumping into the talk a little bit, but in architecture we have, you know, hundreds of years, or I mean, about 150 years of architects. Before that, it was just kind of builders and community building and built environments, and that goes back to time immemorial. So there were just things that we did because they felt right and we understood them, and they became called patterns, right? So if we look at if you're looking at, say, software, we still are trying to figure some of that stuff out, and there's some things that we definitely have that work really well. We just have to figure out, codify them, and then talk about them, and they become more natural to us. Like, I think nowadays it's pretty common that you would say what a credit card form should be like, and you know when you have a good credit card form experience and a bad one. Similarly with the login screen. The login screen is pretty standard and straightforward. We all have a pretty good idea of how those work because we've been building them now for 20 years. But some things are still like, we're kind of giving it out and what works and what doesn't. And, you know, a lot of this research is happening in places, you know, where you have high volumes of users and a lot of interaction. So Facebooks and things like that, like, you know, I like something was an initial interaction, but then that became, well, you know, I support you, or I like you, became support, or I'm angry about this, or what, you know, they kind of try to divide that up into other things, because you're like, you know, I'm mad about blah, 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 and thumbs up, or like, I'm sick, thumbs up. Yeah, that doesn't really work, right? But it's not necessarily thumbs up. It's like, I feel for you, I'm here for you. So it's starting to see like, oh, there's awkwardness here. And I think one of the most awkward things in design has actually been recent. Design and app design specifically has been of automation. So I have, you know, here's a memory from 8 years ago, and you had a lot of likes on it. So the computer's like, oh, I should show you this. oh, but it's this friend of yours that passed away. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks for the reminder.
Yeah. Thanks for the reminder.
So, you know, that we're still figuring some of this stuff out, but you know, a lot of as we figure these things out, they kind of become expected. And so when we see something out of band, it's like, oh, that's not right. That feels wrong. But sometimes we haven't figured all those things out yet. You know, with thousands of years of building we have.
Well, excellent. So I guess this is a good translation into your talk, which is titled "The Timeless Way of Building."
Yeah.
So if I see that on the schedule, I read the abstract. Give us kind of the gist of what I should expect as an attendee coming to your talk.
Okay, so far I've really actually been talking more about visual patterns, but the talk actually dives more into software patterns. So the Gang of Four the pattern architecture stuff. Christopher Alexander's The Pattern Language, by reputation. I don't think many people have ever read it. I think it's one of those things that everybody talks about. Oh yeah, pattern language. I love that book. And they might have like thumbed through it at the bookstore, or they have it on the shelf, right?
I was just looking. I'm like, I might have that book.
And so what people don't, I mean, this is just the nature of having gone to architecture school. These things are pounded into you like, hey, you should read these 1,700 books, go. That came out of an era in the 70s, and Christopher Alexander, who's still alive and still doing great architectural and theoretical research, wrote 3 books. And the first one talks about, called The Timeless Way of Building, which is kind of the entirety of the impetus for a pattern language, which is more about just the documentation of patterns in the book. And then the third one is actually them trying to apply it, and it didn't work as well as they thought it was going to work. So when we look at, you know, so often people are looking at patterns and they're just saying, oh, I'm going to do, you know, this pattern or that. And as people working more in, most of us aren't working in low-level languages anymore. Most of us are working in Ruby or in PHP or things like that. So we don't actually have to write. We just write .each. You know, we are actually saved a lot of the pain, and a lot of these patterns have been decided by, in Ruby at least, by Mats and other guys over the course of, you know, what, 15 years now, 20 years of development. And they've said, this is how you do it. So it's great. It lets us get right to the point. And so now we start looking at, you know, more fine, detailed pieces and patterns. But so often someone's going to say, oh, I'm going to use this because that's what the... And so with especially junior developers, you see this all the time. They're just like, I used a pattern. You're like, why?
Yep.
Why did you use that? What was the impetus? And what our goal is as software developers and as designers and as people who make software and products that get used in the real world is, how do we improve our understanding of this digitally built environment so that we move from saying, I'm going to put an alcove here because an alcove is the pattern, and actually say, well, this is just the flow and this is what makes sense and this is right.
Yeah.
And it's in many ways, pattern languages are truly akin to spoken languages. When you speak English, you don't think, I'm going to use the present pluperfect here. You just say whatever conjugation because you've spoken it since you were usually a very young child. And there are certain languages that you can see people learning them later in life have a lot of difficulty. There's so much complexity and oddity in English that, you know, that's always interesting to see somebody who could, you know, it's like, that doesn't mean exactly what you think it means. It's technically the right thing to say, but it's the way somebody would say that is different.
Yeah.
So I think one of the big things to look at with, you know, coming into the talk is, if you're looking at patterns on a regular basis, or if you're developing software on a regular basis, so often than not, you don't even think about this. You're like pulling stuff from a pattern library, or throwing in this other thing, and you're doing it just because that's the way it's done, and you don't necessarily know the why. And looking at, especially if you're doing work where you talk about patterns or you're coming up with these kind of things, being able to say, oh, I need to change this and change my approach or expand this educational side here so I can understand better what I'm doing. And we go through a whole bunch of examples in both software and some of a lot of the principles, like don't repeat yourself and all these things. These are patterns. And so understanding where they came from and how we apply them really becomes important. So instead of just saying, yeah, don't repeat yourself, it means and where it's coming from, except that you heard it as a buzzword and some senior developer yelled it at you because you had 4 pages with the same code.
Yeah,
you actually understand the why. And it's the same way of moving from this is just part of becoming a better developer, a better designer, a better product builder.
I can't tell you how many code bases where I have a senior level developer who goes in and they over architect this huge solution, and they write hundreds of lines of code, and I going, why did you do all this when you could have just written these 3 lines and used the language, used the platform in the way that it's supposed to be used? And they go, but there's this one little edge case where I need to protect for it. It's like, let's worry about that when that happens. Let's not go off the beaten path. Yeah, and it's not just new developers, it's old developers as well. It's really easy to over architect your solutions.
Totally.
Oh, excellent. So that is, I need to come to your talk. I hope it's at a point in the day where I don't have to do anything organizer wise, because I really want to see your talk. So I
think it's in the morning on day 1.
Oh, well, we could change that. So I'll fit it around my schedule. How about that?
Sure.
So because it's design patterns, do I necessarily, I know you do a lot in Ruby Rails. Do I need to be a Rails developer to come here? Can I work over in Python or .NET while I still get something out of your talk?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the patterns we're talking about are used across the board. Now, most of the examples I'm showing are in Ruby. I'm going to try and pull a few more from some other languages just to see if I can be on it. But the principles and the patterns themselves and the concept is I mean, you could be writing in assembly arguably, and you'll still get something valuable out of it. Most of the examples are not necessarily like you have to know Ruby to understand them, and most of them are very basic and simple, and I walk you through them. So even if you don't know Ruby or Rails or whatever I'm referencing, it's not some super complex solution.
Alrighty, awesome. Well, let's move on. So you've already mentioned you're a native Virginia. You said you used to live down in Yorktown. And you were with us last year, weren't you? At RevolutionConf?
I was.
That's right. So give us a more a veteran's perspective of Virginia Beach. If I'm an attendee coming to Virginia Beach for the first time, what are there any little secrets that you think people should look into while they're here in town?
Yeah, so it's funny. Virginia Beach has changed so much since when I was a kid. Like things that I remember as like, you got to do this. They're like, oh, that's gone. I'm like, what? I think, is the Jewish Mother still there? Is that gone?
It closed. Yeah, that closed a couple of years ago, I believe. It closed and reopened, and it closed again. So I actually need to double check, but I'm pretty sure it's closed.
Okay, that's a bummer. There is another place I'm trying to remember. It's like a 1960s diner in a hotel on the beach. It's really cool for brunch if you're hanging out. If you can get in, it's a long line. Well, I mean, just walking up and down the boardwalk, especially if the weather is beautiful, early morning, sunrise coming up, that's awesome. The signs, it's just funny to see them. They have these signs that have a circle with a line through it and like a cartoon, no cursing, cursing thing. So it's like a no cursing sign. Yeah. Those are hilarious, just in the sense of like that we made a sign for it.
Well, let me give the context to that. So in Virginia Beach at the boardwalk, it's against the law to curse. And to use foul language, and you could get a ticket for getting caught cursing on the boardwalk.
Well, you need to bring an air horn to beat yourself.
Virginia Beach takes its oceanfront very seriously, and so they have rules like no cursing. They want to make it family friendly, which makes a ton of sense. So you have a raunchy crowd over here, and then you have the families. Those two types of audiences don't mix very well. But then they also have at 2 a.m. when all the bars close, they have spotlights that turn on and really loud music. And I don't know if they still do that, but this is what I've been told, to try to drive everyone out of the bars. They had lawsuits against that. But a good thing to note is our hotel where RevolutionConf is about 5 minutes away from the boardwalk. And our hotel offers a free shuttle every hour that will take you down to the boardwalk. and we'll bring you back, and that's no additional charge. So we hope people take a break from the conference, go enjoy the area if you can, because there's a lot to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say, I mean, one of the must-do Hampton Roads things is 17th Street Surf Shop. It's been there
forever,
since the 60s or something. Yeah. And it's, I mean, go get a shirt and then you'd be like, yeah, dude, I surf. I don't surf. I'm too tall, and I've tried, and I fall over before standing up. So I bodyboard at most, and that's about it.
I'm the same way. I tell everyone surfing is just like skiing for me. I just fall, and I don't have the balance for it.
Exactly.
We were throwing around ideas for RevolutionConf this year, and one of the ideas was to offer surfing lessons to attendees and to speakers. I don't think that's going to happen this year because the guy who was going to teach it, he moved away. So, and it's a lot on him to get prepared for teaching surfing when he's out of the state. So maybe next year we can do that because a lot of people ask, "Hey, where can I go surfing?" And
also the Bayside beaches are nice too. They're a lot quieter in some cases, and and waters. I mean, if the water's rough on the ocean side, the Bayside beaches are always pretty chill. So I mean, there's just a lot. It's a nice place to relax and hang out. I mean, you can go down to like Rudy's Inlet down at the south, and there's some cool restaurants there on the water.
Yep. There's plenty to eat that's not chain restaurants.
Good seafood, good. I mean, if you like to see, I'm not a big seafood guy, but if you're going to get anything that comes from Chesapeake Bay, that's one of the places to get it.
Yep. All right. So, John, you're, like many speakers, a seasoned conference attendee. We imagine a lot of our attendees are going to be first-timers, or they don't do this very often. Or they go to a much bigger conference and they're used to thousands and thousands of people. They're not used to just a couple hundred, a very intimate conference setting. What recommendations would you give to someone whose RevolutionConf is their first conference?
Oh wow! If you are not if you're not part of a bigger group. Try and just introduce yourself to as many people, like just kind of, meet people as much as you can. That's, a lot of people here are going to be rolling solo or in small teams. Group, I'd say the opposite. Try and, you see some guy standing over there, be like, hey, come on, over here. It's such an opportunity for cross-pollination and getting ideas from radically different people. Just finding out what people are doing in the industry. You learn so much of people have such similar and yet such divergent problems. So it's really cool to always bounce ideas around and say, oh, you're doing that. What is your solution? How did you figure that out? So yeah, I am a wallflower. I'm an introvert. I have to force myself to go say hi to people. It's difficult for me to do. So it's something just to, make sure especially if you're a first time or second timer, or you're not a very extroverted person. The likelihood is most people aren't either. So just try it, go out and say hi. I'd say the other thing to do is if you're going as a group and you have different interests, divide and conquer. So look at the schedule, try and get as much exposure and then share notes. Are you guys going to be recording this stuff this year?
We are hoping to. It was a priority for us, and we're looking for the right budget quality mix. And sure. We're hopeful that we'll be able to flip the switch on that.
Awesome. Yeah, because sometimes you get the talk or you don't get the talk, and it's even when they're recorded, like every single talk, and I'm like, oh, I should watch that. And 2 years later, I still haven't watched it,
Yeah.
So, but divide and conquer, sharing the notes if you're going as part of an office team or something like that, or just, oh, what was that talk about? It's always a good way to try and, one, reinforce it for yourself, and two, learn from others. Yeah, and otherwise, I would just have as much fun as you can. Don't feel like you're going to miss out on something. Just go to the stuff that's interesting for you. And if you sit down in a talk and in the first 5 minutes you're like, oh, this is not what I wanted, just go to the next one. Don't. Yeah. We're not going to be offended. And
I am. I'm always offended when someone leaves my talks. I will stop the talk and go, excuse me, sir, or excuse me, ma'am, why are you leaving? And poor guy in the back, he'll say, I just have to pee. I'm just going to the bathroom. I'll be right back.
Yeah. And so I think that's, I mean, there's just have a good time and learn as much as you can and meet as many people as you can. You know, and there's a lot of people I met at conferences years ago now that I see when I'm out on the circuit. If I go to a Rails conf, I run into people from overseas that I see maybe once every 6 months, or we follow them on Twitter. And that's, it's more than an acquaintance, but not really. But I mean, we still keep up, and, it's cool to hear when those people launch products like Roy Tomage in the Netherlands. He launched App Signal recently. And so been able to, it was cool to hear from him, hey, I've launched this, you should check it out. Oh, I will. And, and it's funny because you get in the life cycle of a product, you get, people emailing you, asking you to convert, and, was there something wrong? And I'm like, no, I'm good. Tell Roy I said hi. And it's fun to be able to, like, they're like, oh, okay.
Absolutely. Like you and I met. So you're wearing the T-shirt of one of my favorite user groups here in the area, 757RV. And it was years ago. You came down to do a talk for them, and that's where you and I met. So in just like these type of relationships, they start with the introduction. They kind of move to Twitter for a little while, and then you show up at RevolutionConf. It's like we're old friends. It's like, hey, it's good to see you again, even though we have only physically met once or twice. It's funny how these relationships start.
Exactly.
But excellent. So let's move on to self-promotion. Do you have anything going on that you want to talk about, that you want people to go see? Promote away.
Well, I'm working on something now, and if people have any questions or ideas, I'd love to, or I'm having problems with this. I'm currently working on a UX for developers.
Okay.
Thing. So
wow, that's
still trying to determine if it's going to be like a video series, or if it's going to be more of just a book, or if it's something. But like, I every time I'm doing consulting or working with engineers, I hit the same issues over and over again, and so I've kind of started to codify that into here's a cheat sheet. Because remember, I mean, most of the time as developers, we have the final commit rights. We are the ones that make things real. We push it into the source code. So the designer can make up this wonderful mock-up, and that's great, but it's got to be built by a developer. It's got to be, tied together and made real. So, and say, hey, you forgot about this part of the flow, or hey, let's look at this. And being able to collaborate with a designer more effectively, I think is part one of it. And part two is often developers do not have enough design resources in many companies. So not that you're going to sit there and like suddenly move into Photoshop and that's your new life, but that you understand, more just, I'm going to make this flow great. And then we'll get somebody to make it, kind of fit a visual style later, but the experience of the flow is good. So really kind of focusing on teaching developers about that kind of stuff, talking about personas and user stories, and coming up with that kind of toolkit, crazy eights, things like that, so they can work in an environment with designers and also be collaborative in the design process, because design is not how something looks, it's how something works, to Josh's quote. So that's something I'm working on right now. So if you guys have ideas or you have questions, I'd love to hear them when I'm at the conference. Just come find me. I will be hanging out both days, and do not feel like you're bothering me. Please come up and chat, and I would love to hear about it. And hopefully we'll be moving towards releasing that towards the end of the year.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to it. I'll buy it because I always need a reminder at how to do this stuff. So you also bring up an excellent point. For attendees out there, speakers are human. Just come up and talk to them. They love interaction. If you see a speaker who's just kind of standing off to the side, or even if they're already conversing with someone, just come over and say hi. That's how these relationships get built.
Totally. And all of us were first-time speakers at one time. And I mean, I remember I went to Mountain West RubyConf, and I'm going to do disservice to her last name, but Eileen, I want to say Yashel.
Mm-hmm.
She's now on the Rails core team. And 3 years ago was the first time she'd ever spoken in public.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
So, I mean, like, just, it's not, we're not some magical, mystical group of people. We just tried something and it worked, and we keep doing it over and over.
Yes. And I'll tell attendees, if there's a speaker you're intimidated to go up and meet, come find me, and I will personally introduce you to anyone that you want to meet. So I know John can be intimidating. He's such a big shot in the industry. You're hard to come up and talk to.
Sure.
All right, John, where can people find you on the internet if they want to talk to you before the conference?
On Twitter, I'm at Bobo Roshi, BOBOROSHI. My hasn't been updated in forever design site consulting stuff is Meticulous, METICULOUS.com. And CargoSense site, I don't have, my email's not up there, but you can hit me at actually email-wise, John at Meticulous.com is probably easier than sending it to my CargoSense email. And if you're in Charlottesville, drop me a line, grab lunch.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, now you've given everyone an excuse to come to Charlottesville. So, yes, sir. All right. Well, thank you so much. And we're looking forward to RevolutionConf and seeing your talk, The Timeless Way of Building.
Great.
So, everyone out there, tickets are still on sale. Go to revolutionconf.com. And June 1st and 2nd, you can see John and 49 other fantastic speakers. So, John, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Kevin. Have a good one.